Good afternoon, and welcome to our federal hiring panel as part of the Career Enrichment Network's Federal Government Week. My name is Danielle Liddick, and I'm a career coach from the Career Enrichment Network. Joining me is my colleague, Dana Wenger, also a career coach, as well as student and alumni relations coordinator for the office. In this role, Dana manages the Alumni Mentor Program. This program matches current Penn State students with an alumni mentor, and FYI, registration deadline is this Friday in 2 days. I'm sure Dana will be plugging the link into the chat for you. If interested, please sign up. What an awesome opportunity. Just for your information, if you were not aware, the Career Enrichment Network just had an amazing experience with an in-person DC trek yesterday, taking 50 liberal arts students interested in internships and full-time positions in government careers to Washington, DC to network with alumni and visit the Partnership for Public Service Expo. A couple interesting stats to consider. Less than 7% of government employees are under the age of 35. And 1 in 3 government employees are eligible to retire by 2025. So much opportunity for recent grads and students. The CRIM Expo will be tomorrow. I want to make sure everyone's aware of that as well. A reminder, from 11 to 3 in the hub, there will be 60 agencies at this fair, and we will also add this link for you as well.
Just 1 second, Danielle.
Sure.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dana. And I just want to let you know, the chat is missing right now. So I'm putting these all in an email, and I'm going to be sending you these links via email, and you can click on them there as Danielle's talking.
Thanks so much, Dana. With that being said, we are thrilled to be joined by some amazing PSU alumni who have volunteered their very important time to share information on the federal hiring process and public service with you all. They can provide insight and information on how to apply for positions, where to find them, how to make your federal resume stand out, and any tips that they want to share on important skills and qualifications that can help you stand out. We encourage you to add questions in the Q&A, which Dana will monitor that, and we will do our best to answer these questions. We will also be adding important links and information. We were going to put them in the chat, so we will share these with you after the session this afternoon. Now, let me do the honors, please, of introducing the panelists. Firstly, by alphabetical order, we have John Allegro. John is a recruiter at the Federal Reserve Board in Washington, D.C., where he oversees a portfolio of technical and non-technical full-time recruiting, the agency's new employee orientation program, and a portion of its early career strategy and summer intern program. He also serves as a design and experience advisor for the board's HR information systems. He serves as co-chair of the Pride Employee Resource Group, leading its event planning and educational programming. Outside of work, John sings with his choir, the Essence of Joy Alumni Singers. He volunteers with Out for Undergrad, a nonprofit organization focused on professional development and career readiness of LGBTQ+ students, and is an indoor cycling enthusiast and coffee lover. Thanks a lot, John. I can join you with the coffee. Next up is Sasha Haas. Sasha currently serves as the Peace Corps recruiter for Penn State. Sasha served as a food security volunteer with the Peace Corps in rural Guatemala, teaching organic gardening and nutrition classes to indigenous populations. Sasha has dedicated her career working with nonprofits specializing in food systems and began her own consulting business to assist new nonprofits navigate policy, secure funding, and develop strategic programming to best serve their communities. Originally from California, Sasha enjoys spending time at the beach, hiking in the mountains, and cooking Italian food with her family. She recently completed her MBA as a Coverdell Fellow, emphasizing the creation of new avenues for social impacts and sustainability within the field of business. Thanks again for being here, Sasha. And thirdly, we have Wendy Stoner, who serves as the Chief of Staff and Director for Management and Communication for the Office of Strategy and Innovation with the Federal Acquisition Service at the U.S. General Services Administration. She is responsible for human capital, organizational development, training, budget, engagement, strategic direction, and communications for the organization. Ms. Stoner has also previously served in numerous senior leadership positions across GSA, including Chief of Staff for the FAS Office of Travel, Transportation and Logistics, and the Chief Financial Officer and Director for National Recruitment and the Emerging Leaders Program within the Office of Human Resources Management. She has 20 years of talent acquisition, talent management, leadership development, and senior management experience. Ms. Stoner's work has helped GSA fuel the pipeline to meet the agency's future leadership and succession planning needs. And she is a proud Penn State alum. So again, thank you all for being here, John, Sasha, and Wendy. We encourage you all, our participants, to add questions in the Q&A. Please do not be shy. This is the time for you to get your questions answered. But to begin things off, I would like to turn to the panelists and ask each one of them to start off. Can you please talk a bit about your role within the federal government and or the Peace Corps, please, to get us started? And if we can just go around as you were introduced, John, followed by Sasha, then Wendy to begin with things off.
Sounds great. So yeah, I am a recruiter for the Federal Reserve Board, which is part of the larger Federal Reserve system, but we are the government piece of the entire system. So you'll see other Federal Reserve banks around the country, and they are separate from us. So in a lot of ways, my role is a bit unique because my work life kind of functions 50% government and 50% private in terms of how it feels. So I'll have a slightly different lens for you today in terms of kind of reminding folks too that not all federal hiring is the same. I feel like that's always my role in these kind of discussions, as there's still a lot of variety in it as well. So yeah, happy to talk about that and kind of help to clarify some of that navigational piece in terms of finding other opportunities that may be outside of a lot of the other channels that you hear about. So yeah, so that's my day, is really spending most of my time in the talent acquisition space. And yeah, I'll pass it over to Sasha.
Thanks, John. So my position is also kind of unique in regards to recruitment. I'm a strategic campus recruiter, so I am housed at Penn State and recruiting only Penn Staters for the Peace Corps, volunteer positions. So there's the Peace Corps is a federal agency, and it's probably very similar to what Wendy and John might speak to in terms of hiring for the federal agency, but in terms for volunteerism, and the 2 years of service that you can complete after your undergrad, that's my role. So I spend a lot of time going out to classrooms, giving chats about what my experience was in the Peace Corps, kind of giving an overview of the benefits, why one would want to do the Peace Corps, and then meeting with students one-on-one to help them bolster their application, understand the process, and get them into the Peace Corps if that's what they would like to do. So that's kind of what my job entails. Wendy.
Thanks, Sasha. Nice to have you all here today. Looking forward to the next hour and the conversation we're going to have. So currently, I am not serving in a direct recruiting role. I used to be GSA's national recruiter and ran a leadership development program for recent college graduates. And so I've got a lot of experience in that arena, and I still like to keep my toe involved. But I am currently a chief of staff. And basically what I tell people is that's kind of like herding cats. I have so many different responsibilities, but I am looking, I have to be very detail oriented, but I am looking sort of enterprise wide to ensure that really just, as this large government organization that, we're responding to, data calls, whether that's from Congress or OMB, which is an arm of the White House, or, something internal to GSA, making sure that the timeline of all our projects and initiatives are staying on track and that stakeholders and customers are all happy. And so it's kind of a role that I've I've been in for a while, but I feel like once you worked in the government or even a company and you've gotten sort of a breadth of experience and knowledge that, you're able to sort of serve as this, senior leader in an organization. So I get to have sort of like visibility across a lot of different parts of our organization, and that I enjoy that. I like the variety. I like dealing with lots of different people. Sometimes I have to be the disciplinarian, so making sure that people are, following what they're supposed to be doing and all of that. So anyway, that's sort of my day-to-day job, but I do have a lot of experience in the past recruiting recent college grads. I used to come to Penn State, lots of colleges and universities, recruiting, soon to be recent graduate talent. And as Dana mentioned, or maybe Danielle, just the statistics across government. But the government desperately needs to be hiring more young people with 21st century skills. And that's, what we're all here to talk about today. And, GSA is no different. And super quick, GSA it's an independent agency that we realize a lot of folks probably don't know anything about, probably never heard of before, but we're kind of like the federal government's business manager and landlord. And we actually don't get an appropriation from Congress. So for most agencies, they get a pot of money from Congress, which comes from tax dollars and all of that. Well, GSA is kind of like a business. We make our own money. So we sell goods and services or house other agencies in our real estate. And that's how we collect revenue based on providing these services to the rest of the federal government. So if you're looking for a job that maybe, you never weren't sure about government, is it too government-y or bureaucratic? Well, GSA doesn't really operate that way, because if we did, we might not be able to continue to collect the revenue we need to run our business. So that's just a little bit about GSA, but I'll turn it back over to Danielle, because she's probably like, you need to stop talking now. So anyway.
Thanks so much. I appreciate all of your perspectives and insights and information, and I'm sure that the attendees do as well. So to start things off, in addition to that, Wendy had mentioned about how much applicants are needed for the federal government, and I'm sure Sasha can say the same for the Peace Corps. On the federal government side first, John and Wendy, can you talk about, for these folks who are interested in this process, what are the key steps in the federal hiring process for them to take into consideration?
Yeah, the big question. Yeah, so I think first and foremost, it's hitting the job board, seeing what's out there, and or meeting with recruiters and folks that you can connect with, just like you would for any other organization. And as I kind of mentioned in my brief intro, there is some variation there. So USA Jobs is a good one-stop shop. It's not the only shop to stop at, though. Is kind of how I say that. And so there are other agencies whose rules are slightly different. Wendy mentioned some variations with GSA. Same thing with My World. We're not on USA Jobs. We don't post anything there. My hiring rules are all completely different. In my day-to-day life, I really function like a private sector recruiter. So a lot of the rules and processes and kind of maybe red tape that you hear about in federal hiring is not existent in the Fed and a number of other independent agencies. And so those are a lot of the ones that, as Wendy mentioned, don't receive their appropriations from Congress. So they're able to move around and build their own policies and rules. So what that means for you is that maybe your hiring process will be different. It might be easier. But the other, I would say in general, the biggest thing to look for, and some of these tips are really applicable anywhere you're applying, pay really, really, really close attention to what requirements are listed when you are going to apply to something, if someone has not directed you there because they know that it'll work for you. The rules are really specific. And if you don't understand them, find somebody who does, so that you can get a better idea, so that when you are going out to submit applications, you're doing it effectively. Because I think that's a really hard thing as you apply to a lot of jobs, right? It can be demoralizing when you're like, wow, I've clicked and been staring at the screen for hours and submitted all these things and nothing happened. And it may be that you're just submitting to things that aren't quite in your qualifications sandbox, right? As a recent grad, or the major that you have, or the amount of experience that you would bring into the role. So that's probably the broadest way I can answer that, is you really have to pay attention, because for better or for worse, and sometimes it bites government in its own butt, we have a lot of really specific requirements for our roles.
So I might just add to what John said. So unfortunately, GSA isn't one of those lucky agencies that doesn't have to follow most of the federal government's hiring rules. So GSA does post jobs on USA Jobs, and most federal agencies are going to be posting their hiring opportunities in that one portal, that one location. One thing that you can do as a student, or a soon to be, if you're a senior and you're graduating either in December or May, is you can set up a profile on USA Jobs. And I would specifically look for jobs posted under what we call the Pathways Hiring Authority. There is there's a program for recent graduates or soon to be recent graduates. And there's another one for current students, which would be the typical internship opportunity. There's also one if you're a grad student for the Presidential Management Fellows Program. So anyway, but there's 3 components, but you can set up a profile where when agencies post jobs that fit what your profile is, you should get pushed via email these job opportunities. And I think that's a good idea. You can pick, designated geographic location. There are a bunch of questions and criteria you can fill out, but that's probably the best way. But I would really encourage you to pay attention to when federal agencies are coming to campus or doing virtual information sessions. Any kind of connection that you can make with recruiters from different federal agencies is valuable, because if you can make a connection with someone, that certainly can help. Now, one thing I will say, and this is a little unfortunate with the way the government operates, but the federal government has set up a lot of hiring preferences into their hiring. And so often you may not hear back from agencies and you've applied or you've submitted lots of applications, and by no fault of yours, generally. It's not because you're not qualified. It's not because you wouldn't be great at the job, but because of certain particular hiring preferences that are built in to the process, you may not get passed on to the hiring manager for consideration. But my plug to you is keep trying. Just keep trying, submit lots of applications. Like John said, pay attention to what the qualifications are on the application, and make sure your resume, or if you have to answer some questions, that you are specifically addressing those qualifications, because that will absolutely help you get referred or considered. And there's a whole lot of other things. But I know Danielle has lots of questions, so we'll move on.
This is wonderful. This is great information. Thank you so much. We so appreciate all of this. We have a couple of questions in the chat, but before I get to those, I wanted to ask something specifically for Sasha. So I'm sure everybody's heard of the Peace Corps, but just to kind of provide a little bit more about the mission of the Peace Corps, if you can give an overview of the program and its mission, and also just speak to the process of becoming a volunteer, a part of that mission, for those who might be interested.
Sure. Thank you. So the Peace Corps, it was started in the 70s by our president, John F. Kennedy, and it was a program initiated to help bring peace and friendship to other nations, essentially. So it was like an exchange of cultures from the United States to other foreign nations. So the Peace Corps today, it's a 27-month program. So 3 months of intense training, and then 2 years, typically located in a remote setting. It could be a village, could be a town, could be a city. And you're there to serve. So it's a volunteer service. There are benefits in terms of when you finish, you get non-competitive eligibility, which can help you then later apply to a federal position with John or Wendy. Or you can also take advantage of fellowships to get your master's or PhD programs, and there can be full tuition coverage for that. So there's a variety of reasons why people do choose to serve. Till this day, it's still to promote peace between countries in the United States. So we, as Americans, can understand other cultures and help other cultures understand our values and what we're up to. So that's really the main goal, but there are 6 different sectors where you can really specialize and work in. So there's health, youth development, agriculture, environment, community economic development, and then education. So just by having your undergrad, you're eligible for all 6 sectors. And it's really based on your interest and some maybe volunteer experience that you've had throughout your life that makes you eligible, and which program you want to go into. So it's a wonderful experience, in my opinion, as a returned Peace Corps volunteer. And the best way to get involved in it is to meet with a campus recruiter. So you're lucky that you have one at Penn State. Not every school has one. Or even just look at the general website. There are, at peacecorps.gov, there are positions that are available now, and you can go in and choose the country. You can choose the assignment, and as John and Wendy both mentioned, make sure you look at the qualifications, make sure that you're not overextending yourself, because that may set you up for failure, or you just might not get in. So you want to be realistic, and you can also just apply to the Peace Corps as a general applicant and say, I will serve where I'm needed, which is really wonderful, and it shows your flexibility, which you will need as a Peace Corps volunteer. So yeah, that's kind of my quick spiel as much as I could.
That was a great spiel. I appreciate that. I don't believe a lot of students who are considering opportunities realize the connection between the Peace Corps, especially the non-competitive consideration too.
Yeah.
So thank you for mentioning that. That's
course.
awesome. One question in the chat. Student asks, I'm super interested in HR within the government, really want to know the basic qualifications that the student can grow on to get in HR, as well as your position in HR. What personally are you tasked to look for when hiring people? We start with Wendy.
Okay. So I would say and John may have a slightly different answer to this, but for most entry level positions across the government, except for some unique occupations, they pretty much have the same qualifications. There isn't anything at that entry grade level, usually a GS7, that is unique to that kind of position. So what I used to look for were good communication skills, quantitative skills, and analytical skills, people willing to learn, people who were good self-starters. Those are pretty generic qualifications, and most federal agencies are going to ask you to upload an official transcript, at least in the application process, and then you would submit like a final a formal transcript, especially if you haven't graduated yet, by the time they're hiring you for the position, so they can see what you've taken, what your grades are, all that good stuff. But honestly, I feel like, don't focus so much on specific skills or qualifications. To me, it's sort of being that well-rounded individual that you are going to learn, as a college student. So that's my answer to that question, but John might have it more specific.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if you are thinking too specifically about getting into HR work in government, HR work in general, I still feel like feels kind of mystical to get into, because the profession itself is still half people who never went to school for that and half people who did. And then out of all those people, most of them stumbled into the role, right? And so it can feel, I'll give you, I don't know if maybe this is how you're feeling, but just in case you are, if you're feeling like, how do I go straight into this because I can't find anybody who did? I did, but I still stumbled a little bit into it, right? And so it can feel a little ominous, like, how do I get into this HR stuff? One of the things I will say is that in general, if you can find alignment in your previous experience with the industry that you're looking at or the business line that you'd be kind of working with in an HR world, that helps, right? HR work has similarities and it also has differences no matter where you are. But if you can play that thread, and even within government, right? Say you had an internship in city government or housing and municipal space, and then you apply to an HR job at housing and urban development. I mean, I'm being really on the nose here, right? But even within federal spaces, there can be some like maybe the same kind of like industry alignment. So for me, I really played on my banking and finance background because I had done internship work in banking and finance. I spent a year at AIG before I came here. I knew that world. And for the Fed, they are that, right? That is part of that world. That's also who they hire, right? Everyone that we hire that doesn't come from another government agency has been in private sector banking. So that's a good way to spin when you're looking at HR jobs, if you have that. If you don't, then it's all about, right, everything else that you would normally bring to the table that makes you wonderful, right? And that's fine. So don't just get discouraged, but I think it's more about creating a story that of what makes you unique, whether it's in a cover letter or if it's in an interview, if you get to that space, because yeah, everything's a little different once you get into the HR world in terms of what you're going to be asked to do. So specific skills, it's really hard to say. I will say in general, any data skills you can glean, data analysis skills, HR or anything anymore, it's super helpful, right? So like there's a person, actually the newest member on my team, she did a ton of that work in grad school, loved data. She runs all of our initial, like we have a workforce planning, a big data team, but she does all our initial clean. So if we have report requests that come through or weird, funny questions that can be answered by data, she goes off and at least starts that process for us. And so that's a really marketable skill. So I will throw that piece out there. And I know that there are ways to get that experience at Penn State now that weren't always there, which is wonderful, even in liberal arts. So.
Oh, this is amazing. Okay, I have a couple of questions that kind of lead into these things. I have one for Sasha, but before I get to that question, from what you mentioned, John, about the industry alignment, when you mentioned about that, we have a question about student orgs and or clubs or organizations that might interest federal government hirers at Penn State. So I was thinking SHRM, right, for HR. Are there any specific student orgs, clubs, involvement of any kind that looks good when students are applying for employment in the federal government?
I wouldn't say anything in particular. I do like to just see it because, and I will say this often to students, it's wonderful if you go to school and you get good grades. Lots of people do that. If you go to school, get good grades, and do some other things, then that's an easy way for me to bump you up in the rank order. And for better or for worse, there's a lot of people, right, vying for the same position. And so we have to find some way at some point, right, to put someone on top of someone else in the list. And so I don't know if so I wouldn't say necessarily anything specific, but highlight what you're doing with that org too as well. If you are doing something other than just showing up to general body meetings, not that there's anything wrong with that, but there's a number of times where I've talked to students and like, oh, I'm the treasurer. And I was like, oh, well, you didn't say that. So again, I only know what you tell me. So great leadership examples.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It demonstrates be able to talk about like leadership roles that you've had. I mean, if you are leaning towards some kind of quantitative or banking or finance job, then, and you were the treasurer, we'll talk about, you had to put a budget together and for the organization or do this. But I also think being able to talk about your collaboration with the rest of the people in the club. We collaborate with people all the time at work, and that is a good thing. So what I want to stress to students when you're interviewing or even talking, if you're answering questions in an application, don't feel like all your answers have to be related, say, to a work experience or an internship. If you don't have a lot of that, or you only have a few, which is fine because you're a student, you're not going to have a lot of work experience. Talk about, use your clubs and organizations, sororities, fraternities, all sorts of organizations you may have participated in. Talk about that as if it was like a job, because you have very similar responsibilities or roles, in organizations like that.
Great. Thank you so much. So I feel like in my head, I'm going a little backwards because I had this question my head earlier, but I want to lean on Sasha a little bit when we were talking about the skill sets that are looked for federal government and in hiring processes. Can you speak a little bit about what skills do volunteers typically develop during their service that are valuable for federal employment, for any employment, but in general, but even if you can align them in the federal realm too?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I speak to a lot of students about this as well, that the Peace Corps is a great resume builder for whether you go into government positions or just private sector. It shows that you are willing to work internationally. You have language skills. You're able to work with people that you've never met before. You're willing to go through really difficult times. 2 years commitment in a rural setting is quite difficult. It's not a walk in the park. So most people look at your resume and with that as your background, and understand a little bit more about the whole person, not just the grades. So a great resume builder. Some of the skills that you can glean from the Peace Corps are things that you may never experience in the United States. For example, many people want to go into the teaching profession or education, and the ability to kind of hit the ground running and have a whole classroom to yourself without many hurdles, I guess, in place once you're in country. I know protocols in the United States are going to be much higher than other countries. So once you're vetted and already approved as a Peace Corps volunteer, the access that you will have to materials, to training specific to your country and the culture that you'll be working in is unparalleled to anything else I could ever compare it to. Within that, some personal experience that I had was in the agriculture sector, and I got to work with a top agronomist in Guatemala, as well as the Ministry of Health, the World Health Organization, Save the Children, all the other United Nations sectors, which I don't know if I would have ever had that interaction with them. So the networking within that sphere and being able to work hands-on with those people was just unparalleled, like I said. So really great resume building, really great skill sets that can be learned within the Peace Corps. And you learn a lot about yourself at the same time. So
wonderful. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Speaking of resumes, this is a question in the chat, and Dana and myself and the other coaches in the Career Enrichment Network speak a lot with students about the federal hiring process, and federal resumes is a big topic that we discuss. So the question in the chat is, how does a resume for federal government differ from a resume for private business? We know it's a big difference. Can you speak about the main things that differ between the two? We'll start with Wendy.
Okay. So honestly, what I generally advise is that you still want to try to say what you're trying to say, clear and concisely. Use actionable, words that if you had certain accomplishments, deliverables, things that you can demonstrate with the experience that you're listing on your resume. Any hiring manager wants to see, what you actually did. So we don't have a length, although as a college student, I wouldn't think that your resume should be too long. Although unlike in the private sector where a lot of times they're like, if it's more than one page, we're not looking at it. The government is not that way. My other advice is that, again, pay very close attention to the qualifications on the job application, on the posting, and make sure that you address every single one of the qualifications in your resume somehow, whether it's through work experience, student organization experience, even classroom experience, through case studies or, other assignments that maybe you had to do as a student, with other students, if it addresses, even if, again, it's not in a work setting, that's understandable for an entry-level position. But please make sure that you address everything that's in that in there. And again, don't worry too much about how long it is. But again, as a college student, I would say 2 pages is probably good, but try to make it very actionable. That is helpful. I don't know if John has other recommendations.
No, I'd say that's most of it. I don't actually deal with them on a daily basis.
Oh, nice.
We don't, I mean, we take them if people
Yeah.
use them, but we don't require them. And so in general, though, I would just say everything that Wendy said, plus, right, look for some templates because there are certain things you need to include especially as your career moves on a little bit further, just to make sure you have everything that's listed information-wise there. And I know there's good resources for that already on campus for you. So I think you'll be good to go then.
Sure. And just FYI, on USA Jobs, there is a resume builder that you can use. You can upload your own resume or you can use theirs. And as was mentioned earlier, read the job announcement clearly, because some agencies will not take a resume that was uploaded. For some agencies, they only want you to use the resume builder version. So read the instructions, follow the instructions. If you have any questions, please come and see a career coach in the Career Enrichment Network, and we'd love to work with you on that. Absolutely. Thank you for that.
And can I just add one
yeah.
reminder? Whatever it asks you to upload, do not forget to upload all the things like an unofficial transcript, or if they want a writing sample, I don't know what they might be asking these days, but whatever they're asking for, if you miss one thing and it closes, then it's too late. And they will not consider you if there's anything that's missing. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Okay. We do have a special question for John. So we have a question that says, are current federal employees, military, able to buy back their federal service years, the government side?
Yes, so we are still an agency, and so we give you all of those opportunities if you join us to do all the fun things with service combinations from other agencies, from military time. We even give people credit for DC government and other so there's lots of things in there in terms of crediting your service and factoring that into time off and retirement and all those things. The only difference related to that is that, like, for us, we do not participate in like a veterans hiring preference, right? Which most federal agencies will. So there you may see some variations out there in some of the preferential hiring being in effect for certain agencies. But yep, we would buy all that back.
Great. And we have a specific one for Sasha too. Within the Peace Corps, are there any requirements needed to become a volunteer, such as any age or time requirements? Does the volunteer work have to be year-round? Can it be during summers for shorter periods of time? Anything like that? Thanks.
Great question. So yes, the age requirement is 18 years old. Most people start after they're finished with their undergrad, so it's more about 21 to 23 is the average applicants that are going in. The max age is 85. So for anyone that wants to do it in their retirement, it's also an option. But in terms of shorter stints, it is primarily 27 months. And primarily by that, I mean, it is 27 months. So you are committed to depart once you get a placement, you're committed to depart the date that they tell you you're leaving. And then 27 months after that is when you're supposed to come home. Of course, things happen, or you come home for vacation, things like that. You do have vacation time, so you can go wherever you would like during that period. There is a program called Peace Corps Response. I'm not a recruiter for that, but it is for individuals who have 10 plus years of work experience or have already completed their 27-month Peace Corps service. So someone who's a little bit more seasoned, maybe they want to switch careers and they're a doctor and they want to take a year off and go serve for a year. Those are shorter stints, anywhere from 3 months to 12 months, I believe. So a little bit more appealing to individuals who are off put by the 2-year commitment. But for the most part, the Peace Corps wants you to go in and learn about your community and establish a presence. And typically they have a continuation plan with other volunteers. So that 2-year commitment is really the standard, just to make sure that everything goes smoothly. So.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's great info. Okay. Do you have any recommendations on where to find internship opportunities? Anybody have thought on that?
Having just gone through this myself personally, I would say Penn State has a great network of recruiters that come on campus, and they have information sessions, and they table, and there's the career fair. So they really love Penn State. So you guys are very lucky to be there and have access to that. So go there, get the FaceTime, give them your resumes, follow the instructions. Again, they're hiring people for you as a person. They're not hiring your resume. They're not hiring for the grades. So answer the questions, show a little bit about yourself and who you are as a human, and make those connections. And oftentimes you'll connect with a recruiter in a personal matter, and that will really help you kind of get through the door. So Penn State is my answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Career Center at Penn State is excellent, and they will list internship opportunities, obviously full-time opportunities. Like I said before, if you're looking for a federal internship, most agencies are going to be posting their Pathways internship opportunities on USA Jobs. GSA is actually posting from October 21st to November 1st. And for interns and recent grads, they'll be soliciting for both programs. And we are also doing a number of information sessions, virtual information sessions at various times between October 1st and October 23rd. So I think I shared the links and the information with the with Danielle and Dana, but if anybody does need the information, you're welcome to reach out to me. I think I told them that they're welcome to share my email address, and I'd be happy to connect anyone.
Thank you. And also in the email that we send out with links, we will definitely include on USA Jobs, there is a federal internship portal, as well as the Partnership for Public Service also has a nifty little federal internship finder where you can filter by application season, program duration, program level, career field. It's really, really nice. So thank you all for all of that information, and we will definitely be sharing. Thank you. So we also have a student who's planning on going abroad in Rome next semester. Can internship opportunities be global? And asking how you would recommend putting that on your resume. Does anybody have any thoughts on or recommendations for that?
Go ahead,
Sorry.
John.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I can't speak specifically for the State Department, but I know that they do solicit interns. They're usually unpaid, from what I understand, to work at their embassies and consulates, usually over the summertime. I don't know if they look at undergrad or just graduate students, but if you went to the State Department's website, you might be able to find specific international. USAID would be another agency that might have international internships. I can't say specifically, but those would be two places I would start.
Yeah, and folks are familiar with IES, or they should be if they are in the international space. So if you're, because I'm assuming this is one of those setups with IES where you, as you mentioned, you don't know exactly where you'll be interning after you finish your semester abroad, and you have to figure that out, right? So you can do a placeholder for that, right? And say like, exact internship to be, however you want to word it, right? You can figure that out. But you can do a placeholder as you're mentioning in your question around, so that at least it's captured on your resume. And again, folks, that should know what IES is, or they should be able to Google it. So I'm going to put some of the work back on the recruiters / hiring folks that you'll be sending your resume out to know what they're looking at there, particularly if you are applying to other international organizations or internationally based roles. They really should know what that is, right? So like anyone in the international development world, if you say USAID or USAID, they're not going to look at you with their head sideways, right? Like everyone knows what that is. So.
Great. Question for John. Sorry, John, you're going to have to unmute again. Other than the summer fellowship programs at the board and the banks, are you aware of any other opportunities for current doctoral students to participate? The student says Philly Fed has mentorship program. Also, what positions do they hire for econ PhD students besides board economists?
Yes.
Sorry, that's a long question.
So in terms of summer opportunities, we have the fellowship programs that you mentioned. Those are for when you are ABD though. So you have to be just working on your dissertation, basically, right? A year-ish out from graduation, 6 to 12 months out. And we are literally giving you the summer to work on your dissertation, do a few seminars, hang out with economists, and that's what that looks like. You can also join not only at the board in DC, but any of the reserve banks. You can apply for the regular internship program as well, the research internships. So if that makes sense for you and you have the time and space to do that alongside other coursework or your dissertation, you can come hang out with all the undergrads and the other grad students and have a regular kind of research internship summer. And then when it comes to full-time jobs, you're not excluded from other positions, but a vast majority of my PhD applicants are applying for the economist role. There may be some analyst jobs that you can throw your name in the hat for, and we're not going to knock you out of the running. But we just don't see a ton of folks applying for that. And usually it's because, right, you've spent all of your time and effort to get your PhD, and so you're looking for that role that requires that, right? So it's just kind of a matchup that way. But you do have some other options outside of the formal economist role if you want. Some of the reserve banks have some different hiring. The hiring requirements are a little bit different bank by bank as well. So.
Great, thank you. The next question is for each of you. So we'll start with Sasha, then Wendy, then John, if we can. This is more of a personal question. How did you all find the passion to commit to these jobs? Love
Good
this
question. For me, that's pretty easy. I've always been dedicated to helping others. So the Peace Corps was a no-brainer for me from a very young age. I wanted to do it. The Peace Corps, having completed my volunteer service in the Peace Corps, has really helped shape the rest of my career. Working as the Penn State recruiter right now is not my career path, but more of a passion project. I love talking about the Peace Corps and meeting with young students who are eager and excited as well. So it's just, I don't know, my advice towards this kind of a question is to do what makes you happy. Find a line of service or a line of work that you can express yourself in some sort of way that fills up your cup. So you don't want to really go into a line of work always just for the paycheck. I know that we're working for paychecks, but do something that excites you in some way, shape, or form. And then that's how I got here. So that's it.
I could not agree more with what Sasha said. I will say, if you can find an opportunity, if you're an undergrad when you graduate, or even when you're doing an internship that allows you to try a variety of things, early in your career, because we don't expect you to know exactly what you want to do when you're coming out of, especially of undergrad. And there are opportunities in the private sector and in the government where you might get to participate in a rotational type of program that just gives you exposure and experience trying out different things. And that's a great way to figure out kind of what you like or what you don't like. Honestly, I feel like some of it is luck. And I know that's not a strategy, but a lot of it is just, you using your skills and talents, one, understanding what those are, and then applying them. And you just never know what arena or, occupation that might lead you. Obviously, I was a labor relations major. I was always interested in workforce issues and, human capital, not so much like HR per se, but, I was very interested in, like I said, workforce related types of work. And, I've done a variety of things over my career at GSA, and some of it is just, a lot of it is networking and who you know and what opportunities come available. And so I wouldn't say, at least for me, that it was an exact science and that I had this, even if I had a bit of a plan, I didn't always follow the plan or it deviated, and that was okay. And so don't be disappointed if your plan doesn't go exactly as you think of it in your head, because there's so many great other opportunities that might come your way, if you position yourself and network, with the right folks. So.
I still feel like I'm struggling to come up with an answer, and I even had more time. This is always a hard one. I no one when I was like 9 years old picking out my Halloween costume, right? There's no HR costume to pick out, right? No one when they asked me, what do you want to be when I grow up, said, I want to work in HR. I didn't even know what that was, right? But I think that's also telling, right? Is that we ask these questions so early on. There are only so many options, and there's lots of stuff you don't know, right? There's lots of costumes, work costumes that you can put on that you don't even know exist. And even within the jobs that you get into, there's lots of things that you can do that you wouldn't think of doing, or you wouldn't know that you'd be good at, or that someone would want you to do. Like I'm doing a ton of work on our HR systems, right? So I'm not back end coding, but I'm doing a lot of technical design and requirements decisions and thinking about how the system will work best for people internally. I never thought I was going to do that when I started this job. I just wanted to talk to students and help them because that's what I was good at doing, right? Through my time at Penn State, I discovered like people gravitate towards me. I have an energy for it. I enjoy teaching and learning. I thought I wanted to be a teacher. And then I was like, not so sure about that. I majored in education and public policy when I was at Penn State, so nothing that directly connects to necessarily what I do now. But I loved what I studied. And I picked up and paid attention to what excited me. So when you ask the question, particularly like, well, how do I find the passion? I pay attention to what makes me excited, what keeps me awake throughout the day. And regardless of what the job title is and where the job is, as long as that's most of the portfolio, then you'll be good to go, right? You're not going to always find that 100%. Every day is not sunshiny. But if you can get most of that in your day, that's wonderful. And for me, I get that, right? I get to travel a little bit. I get to meet new people all the time. I've found ways, my job is not baked in, that doesn't have teaching and learning in it, but I've found ways to do that at work, right? So I lead a lot of our D&I trainings now. I'm going to be running all of our training for our new HR system that we're putting in, right? That's not in my title, but I love doing it. And so you find ways to find that passion within what you're doing as well. And so, yeah, you do kind of just have to hope, try a bunch of plans, and know that they're going to change constantly.
And be okay with that, right?
Yep.
You have to be okay with that. Yes. Thank you so much. I'm glad you had no more time to think about it because that was great. We do have another question for you, John. Sorry about this, putting you on the spot. But you had mentioned about PhD programs for the board, but we have a question that's wondering about undergraduate internship opportunities for econ majors. Are they available?
Yes, so ours are open for application now through November 3rd. We have a pretty large research program every summer. We hire about 25 to 30 research interns. So basically you're functioning like a mini research assistant. You're working with a team in the summer on a specific project with an economist. And then when you finish the summer, you, if you want, are in priority consideration for a full-time RA role after graduation as well. So it has that pipeline process built into it. So yeah, head over to our website, check that out. Applications open. Hope to see your name there. I was reviewing them right before this started, so.
Great, thank you. And Wendy, do you have any internship opportunities you'd like to mention or how they may find them if interested?
Sure. So I would say the best way, we do have, a variety of internships. We are hiring, I would call them business analyst roles. We do a variety of business-like work, but they might have a financial component. Being an econ major would be perfect for this, but that's not the only major that we would look at. Really, we're very open. So, but we also hire folks who might be interested in contracting or acquisition. But initially, when you come in, again, just having sort of good analytical communication types of skill sets. But we are posting our Pathways internship and recent graduate job announcements from October 21st to November 1st. And there are a variety of information sessions, and I would highly recommend you try to attend one of those because you're going to learn a whole lot more about what the internship or the recent graduate opportunity will entail. They're both cohort-based programs, so you'd be coming in with people, who are starting just like you are. The internship, it's a summer internship, and then if you choose, you can continue to complete your hours throughout the school year, and then have an opportunity to be offered a full-time position when you graduate. So we are targeting folks who are finishing their junior year for the internship program. So, but you would also get added if you attend one of these information sessions, you will automatically be sent the link, the job application link, and I can share that with the staff in the Career Enrichment Network as well when it gets posted on October 21st. But that way you'll get it pushed to you, and so you'll have it directly, which will make it easier to find, because sometimes finding things on USA Jobs or our website, sadly, can be a little challenging. So, and let me just say, getting hired in the federal government is like the worst part. That is honest to goodness. I can't speak, John probably has a lovely process, but it really truly is the worst part. Once you actually are working in the federal government, no matter what your role is, most people have a really good experience. So don't let the hiring process discourage you.
The same goes for the Peace Corps.
Yeah. And let me just say, GSA hires tons of returned Peace Corps volunteers. So I've hired plenty of returned Peace Corps volunteers. So if you go and you have this cool experience as a Peace Corps volunteer for a couple of years, you have 12 months of non-competitive eligibility for federal positions. And that's a pretty cool thing. So, and we've hired a lot of people that way too.
Thank you. Okay, I have one final question. It is 4:58. I have no idea what happened to the last hour. It's crazy. But I do want to ask this last question of you all, please. Can you each provide one last piece of advice that you can provide the students attending this webinar today when considering working for the federal government or volunteering for the Peace Corps? We'll go Sasha, John, Wendy, please.
Yes, I think it sums up nicely from what all of our input has been today is like follow instructions. You really want to make sure that you're answering the questions and doing exactly what they're asking for. It might feel tedious. It might feel like you don't know why you're spending the time doing this, but the process trust the process. It's in place for a reason, and it's only going to help you in the long run. Also, try different things like Wendy had mentioned earlier, and Peace Corps is a great opportunity to try a lot of different things within a short amount of time. And find the thing that fills your cup. So that's it.
Deep breaths is a big one. And perseverance, keep going. Federal government hiring can feel totally different. In some ways it is, in other ways it's the same work that you're doing with other folks. Get to know people, keep trying, have conversations, make connections. So right? It's not too different in some ways with how you get into our space as you would any others. And I will do quick plug. Anyone who's interested in international development, please put the Peace Corps back on your radar if it's not. It's a great entry point if you're thinking about other organizations too that you want to get into in the international relations, international development space. So.
And I'll be super quick here. First of all, let me just say that if anyone wants to follow up with me after this session, you know, anytime I am totally available, I would be happy to answer questions or help you get an in. And then my last piece of advice is just don't be discouraged if you've submitted lots of applications and you haven't heard anything. Keep going, and I would say submit as many applications, honestly, and I know this sounds like you're not being very discerning, but just submit as many as you can get your hands on for the government, because you only need one that makes it through that process. And again, it's not your fault. Generally, unless you forgot to attach something. But other than that, you know, it truly, do not be discouraged. It is a tough process. I wish that we had a better hiring process than we do, but it is what it is. And so, you know, don't give up. Keep trying.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to allow all our panelists for volunteering your time. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your experiences and your expertise in your respective areas. We greatly appreciate you. To everybody on here, have a wonderful day, and thank you again. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.